By the end of this video, you will know every English sentence pattern, which is vital for advanced English writing and good grammar. We will start with simple patterns. So if you know the basics, skip 2 minutes now. But let's start at the beginning. Let me introduce you to Kim, and we will use Kim singing as an example of the basic patterns. Starting with Kim sang. This is the most basic pattern of all, where we have the subject, which is the person or thing doing an action, and then the verb, which describes the action. Kim is the person, sang is the action, which is the verb. Then we have Kim sang a song. And here we have the subject and verb again, but now we have an object. Kim sang what? A song. A song receives the action from the verb. Kim was a good singer. Now, this is slightly different. Here, a good singer describes Kim in more detail. And this is an example of subject-verb complement. Where we have a complement, we have certain types of verbs that simply introduce a description of the person or thing in the subject. So Kim is the subject, the verb is was, and a good singer is the complement. It describes Kim. Then Kim sang beautifully, and here we have an adverbial. Here we have Kim as the subject, sang as the verb again. Beautifully describes the way, the manner of the action. And this is slightly different. This is an adverbial. And these 5 types of words will come up again and again when we look at all of the sentence patterns in English. Let's go on to something called an indirect object. So let's go back to our subject-verb-object, Kim sang a song. But sometimes we can have 2 objects. Kim sang me a song. And this pattern is subject-verb-object-object. Now, there's a direct object and an indirect object. The direct object is a song. That's what is affected by the verb. A song was affected by the verb. I was not sung. A song was sung. So a song is the direct object. But then the direct object is directed towards me. So I'm the second object and I'm called the indirect object. Now the order of words is flexible here. You can also have the indirect object at the end after to. Now let's look at sentence patterns with complements in more detail. You may remember Kim was a good singer. A good singer was the complement that described Kim. Now here the complement is a noun, but it doesn't have to be a noun. It could also be like this: Kim was excellent. And excellent is an adjective. Or you could even have Kim was on the stage. On the stage is a preposition phrase. On is a preposition followed by a noun, the stage. What about adding adverbials? We had this example at the beginning. Kim sang beautifully. Subject, verb, adverbial. And beautifully was an adverbial because it described the way the action happened. But we can add extra words in as well. Kim sang the song beautifully. Here we have an object before the adverbial. And we can also have the adverbial before a preposition phrase. Kim sang beautifully for the crowd. And we can swap the order around. Kim sang for the crowd beautifully. Now, adverb positioning is very flexible. Find out more at the end of this video about where you can put adverbs into sentences, because sometimes it's not just the pattern of the sentence that matters, it's the type of adverb you're using. The meaning of the other words involved, they all affect the order, and I have more for you coming up at the end. Now let's turn our attention to the passive structure. First, let's describe the passive. Remember our first sentence, Kim sung a song. Now we have a sentence with the words in the opposite order. A song was sung by Kim. The object has now gone to the beginning. Grammatically, we'll call this the subject, but it's actually the object of our original sentence. Kim sung a song. Now a song was sung by Kim. So we have object, then verb, then by the subject. Why do we use this? Well, it's because instead of saying what Kim did, we're now interested in what the object received. A song was sung. And we know we're using the passive because of the verb structure, which I'll come to in a moment. Also in the passive, you could omit by Kim. You could simply focus on the object and the action it received. A song was sung, and we don't know who it's by. We could also add an adverbial to the end here. A song was sung by Kim beautifully. Object, verb, by Kim, by the subject, and then the adverbial beautifully, which describes everything. And we can also change the position of this adverbial. So we can have the adverbial before the verb. A song was beautifully sung by Kim. Or we can have it after the verb. A song was sung beautifully by Kim. Now, let's go back to that verb structure. What makes it different then? Well, in the active form, Kim sung a song. Kim sung. Sung is just the verb on its own. But in the passive form, where the object is receiving the action, was sung. Was comes from the verb to be, and sung here is the past participle of the verb to sing. Let's say some more about the passive. We can also have the direct object and the indirect object in the passive. So moving on from our example sentence, a song was sung by Kim, we can also have a song was sung by Kim to me. So here we have the indirect object at the end, but it doesn't have to stay there. It could also be before by Kim. It could be a song was sung to me by Kim. Or we could say, I was sung a song by Kim. So here, me has come to the beginning of the sentence, so it takes the subject pronoun form of I instead. Or we can simply place it at the end without by Kim. A song was sung to me. And we can also finish with a prepositional phrase in the place of the adverbial. It has the same effect as the adverbial. A song was sung by Kim to the crowd. Object, verb, by the subject, and then the prepositional phrase tells us how this happens, like an adverbial. What about compound sentences? Well, compound sentences are where you take two sentences and you join them together through a linking word, sometimes called a conjunction. The order here is subject, verb, object, then you have the linker, and then another subject, verb, object. So Kim sang a song, subject, verb, object, linker and, this is called a coordinating conjunction, John played a piano. So two sentences are joined together. The two sentences have equal value and enables us to join them together to make one compound sentence. We could actually not include the object at all here. We could have simply said Kim sang and John played. And really is used to show a mirroring of structures between one part of a sentence and another. That's clear here, where we have Kim and John played. Here we're joining two subjects together. They both share one verb. And you can also join two verbs together. Kim sang and played. And we can make longer lists in this way. Kim sang, danced and played. So we have three verbs together. And Kim played the piano and guitar. So here we're joining two objects together. There's actually no end grammatically to the number of verbs that could be joined by commas and then a final and, or objects with a final and commas in the middle. Although it's best not to use more than 3 at a time. Complex sentences take this one step further. They have the same principle as the compound sentences where you're joining two sentences together. The difference here is that you use something called a subordinating conjunction, like although. And here, if you take out although she was ill, if you take out the second clause in this sentence, you lose something of the meaning. Because this sentence doesn't merely mean Kim sang a song and she was ill. It's not just two equal bits of information. Although adds something else. Although tells us that it should have been difficult to sing the song. But she still did. So subordinating conjunctions add some extra meaning. So if you take them out with the clause they're attached to, then you'll lose meaning from the original sentences. So the structure here is the same as with the coordinating conjunction. SVO, subject, verb, object, then the linking conjunction, then another subject, verb, object. But as with before, we don't have to stick to the subject, verb, object pattern. As long as we've got a subject, verb, other things are possible too. And here the X represents another pattern. It could be the object, it could be the adverbial, it could be the complement here. Now, with these conjunctions, we could move them to the beginning when they are subordinating. So as well as saying Kim sang a song, everyone clapped, or everyone clapped when Kim sang a song, you could move the when part to the beginning. So when is the linker or the conjunction. That starts it. Then we have the subject, verb, object in this case, Kim sang a song, and then a subject, verb in the second clause. So it's fine to move the clauses around, but you've got to keep the subordinating conjunction with the same clause. Another type of linking conjunction is a type where a new sentence is commenced, such as with also. Kim sang a song, full stop. Also, she danced. So also doesn't link two sentences together. It starts a new sentence but shows a link to the previous one. And there's lots of linkers that are like this. Before we move on, let's look at another type of complexity. And this is where we introduce a relative pronoun to introduce more information about a noun. The first example has subject, verb, object, but then a relative pronoun and another verb and object. Kim sang a song which was 100 years old. So what is which was 100 years old? Well, that describes the song. So when we use this relative pronoun with another clause afterwards, we introduce information that tells us more about the noun that came before. Similarly, Kim sang a song that she wrote herself. So sometimes, depending on the grammar of this relative clause, as we call it, you can have it with a subject or without a subject. How do you know if you need to add this subject after the relative pronoun? Well, think about if the noun before can fit before the verb. A song was 100 years old. Yes, that makes sense. 100 years old is referring to the song. So in this case, because a song could fit before was, we don't need another subject. The subject is a song. But think about the second sentence. A song wrote herself. That doesn't work. No, she wrote the song. So actually, a song is the object. And because a song is the object of the sentence, we need the subject again. She wrote a song herself. Now we can also have compound complex sentences, and this is a combination of the two features we've just looked at. For example here, Kim played piano and sang a song. That's the compound, but now we add the complex. Kim played a piano and sang a song which was 100 years old. And this is commonly considered the most advanced form of English sentences. So if you want to be advanced with your English, try to combine compound and complex sentences. And let's take this a little bit further still. There's something called paired conjunctions in English. And this is where we have two linkers. that work together in some way in the same sentence. Kim sang a song which was both new and popular. So both tells us we're going to have two things which describe the song. Kim sang a song which was new. Kim sang a song which was popular. Kim sang a song which was both new and popular. So both and new work as a paired conjunction. And there's a few of these in English. On to participles and infinitives. What do we mean by this? Well, let's start off with an infinitive here. Kim sang to entertain the crowd. Notice we've got two verbs here. We've got sang and we've got entertain. Entertain appears to be in the object position. To entertain gives us the reason. What's the grammar here? Well, we have subject, verb, then a preposition to, and then the next verb. So if we want to add a verb to carry on and describe the action of the first verb, then sometimes we use to as a preposition followed by that second verb, but not always. Sometimes we need to follow it with a verb with ing. Kim tried singing to entertain the crowd. So here we have tried as our verb. Singing is what tried refers to, but here we have an ing form. How do you know whether to use to plus infinitive or the gerund? I'm afraid you have to learn them individually. In English, there are a number of verbs that are followed by to plus infinitive and a number of verbs that are followed by verb with ing. You have to learn them separately. Making this even more complex, there's something called the causative. Subject verb, object verb in this case. We'll come back to the causative later, but in this situation, what's happening? Well, we have made, and made is a verb that we can use to describe how something causes something else. And that's what we have here. The crowd made her sing. So what did they make? They made the person, Kim, do an activity, sing. And you can describe it in this pattern, subject, verb, object, verb. But you only do it with certain verbs that indicate that something causes something else, like made or let. There's another possibility here where you have subject, verb, object, verb. But this time, the second verb is in the ing form. The crowd heard her singing. What happened here? The crowd heard something. What was the something? Kim singing. So subject, verb, object, verb. You could have added Kim in front as well. The crowd heard Kim singing. So Kim would replace her in this case. Now let's focus on something called the past participle. We can use the past participle in different parts of an English sentence to increase complexity again. For example, encouraged by the crowd, she sang. Encouraged by the crowd. That tells us something about why she's singing or how she's singing or the purpose for her singing. It's like an adverbial, but it has this structure with the participle of the verb. We have the verb plus ed, so encourage is the verb, encouraged, an ed ending. Then we have the preposition phrase, encouraged by who? By the crowd. We can also simply have the verb on its own. Encouraged, she sang. So encouraged describes the rest of the sentence, perhaps why she's singing. Then we could also move it to the end. So instead of starting with encouraged, we could end with it. She sang encouraged, or she sang encouraged by the crowd. Now, another structure that is similar to the passive is being encouraged. Being encouraged, she sang. So here we have the verb being in its ing form. Then we have encouraged in its ed form. What does this mean? This means she was encouraged. Remember, was and being come from the same verb, to be. So she was encouraged, so she sang. But if you want to combine it as one sentence, being encouraged, comma, she sang. Now let's look at the ing participle, sometimes called the present participle. Dancing to the tune, she sang beautifully. So she was doing this while she sang. It's describing another thing happening at the same time here, dancing to the tune. And here we have the verb with ing and then the preposition phrase to the tune. We could also have the verb with ing followed by another object, singing a song. She entertained the crowd. You could even have multiple phrases with this present participle over and over again. Running and shouting, she left the stage. I didn't have space on the screen, but you could have said running quickly and shouting loudly, she left the stage. So you can build these phrases attached to a present participle to increase the complexity of your adverbial at the beginning of the sentence. Having is another way of doing this. Having sung the song, she left the stage. Sometimes this is called the perfect participle. And this describes something just completed that affects what comes after. And in some situations, rarely, you can even put an object before this present participle. Time running out, she sang quickly. Which really means there was not much time left. Time was running out. Here we have object, verb with ing, and then we have the subject and verb, and whatever comes after the object or the complement or the adverbial. As with the ed endings, you can switch the order around. You could have said, she sang beautifully, dancing to the tune. So the positioning of these phrases is not fixed with what you see on the screen. They can move to the end of the sentence too. There's a form in English called the conditional as well, and this has a particular sentence structure. It's generally involving the word if. If she sings, she gets tired. Here we have if followed by subject-verb, and then a second clause with subject-verb. And if turns into a condition. If the first thing happens, then the second thing is a consequence. We could switch the order around here too. She gets tired if she sings. And we could add an imperative form in the second clause. We'll come to this later in the video. This is where you're giving orders and you leave the subject out. If she starts singing, tell me immediately. So instead of using the subject, you tell me immediately. By using tell on its own, it turns it into an instruction for someone. Now, if can be replaced by other conditional words as well. In all of these sentences, we could have said when instead. When she sings, when she starts singing. And there are some other words you can do that with too. Being more complex with the conditional form, we can also use if only. If only she would sing. If only means there's a desire which has not been met. And we can use this to create a condition in one sentence with one clause. So here we have if only and then your subject-verb clause. We can also use inversion. This means switching the order of the subject and the verb. Had she sung, we would have stayed. This means the same as if she had sung, we would have stayed. And you can do this with many of the conditional forms in English. Now let's look at comparatives, where we're comparing different things together. One of the most common ways to do this is with as, then an adjective, then as. She is as good as her sister. We're not just limited to that though. We could have added a noun as well. She is as good a singer as her sister, and this clarifies what she is better at. Another word we often use is than. She is better than her brother. She is a better singer than her brother. And a very advanced comparative form of English is where we use the with a clause and then the with a second clause. The more she practices, the better she gets. The first clause leads to the second. Practice more, you get better. We can do this in many ways in English, informally. With formal writing, this might be better to be avoided, but informally, this is a structure that's often used at an advanced level of English as a comparative. Noun clauses have certain structures that you should know about too. I believe that she sang for an hour. Let's study the structure here. The subject and verb are clear. The subject is I, the verb is believe. But instead of having an object, such as I believe the truth, we have a relative pronoun with another clause afterwards. I believe that she sang for an hour. And with some verbs, we can use this relative pronoun followed by a clause to make a noun clause. It works as a noun. It works as an object. But in terms of grammatical form, it's actually a relative pronoun followed by a clause. We often do this with information type verbs. We can also switch the order around. Where the crowd went, I followed. So here we have where, which is the relative pronoun. Then we have our clause, the crowd went. And then I followed. The subjunctive verb now has gone to the end. We can have multiple clauses that act as a noun clause, as an object to the sentence. So you could say, I believe that she saw who was following. Two noun clauses that both together create the object. And we can also sometimes omit the relative pronoun altogether. Not I believe that she saw, but just I believe she saw who was following. The subjunctive is not commonly used in English, but there are still a couple of uses that can happen at times. So it's worth knowing what the sentence structure is for this. In the present subjunctive, for instance, I insist that you stop singing, if you think it's gone on too long perhaps, then we have this order here. Subject verb, then we have the relative pronoun again. So again, it's like an object formed out of a relative clause. So that you stop singing. Now, it's not you stopped singing, or if it was he or she, we wouldn't say that he stops singing. In this case, where there's an instruction followed by this noun clause, we can use the subjunctive form, which is simply the bare infinitive in this extra clause when we're in the present. The past subjunctive is commonly used in conditionals, the second conditional, where we're being hypothetical. If I were you, I'd stop singing. Now, grammatically, it should have been I was you. But in the subjunctive form, in the conditional, we switch back from was to the subjunctive were. We need to know how to use imperatives in the right way to be advanced with our English. Now, the most basic imperative is quite simple. Sing a song, verb, object. It's an order. By taking out the subject, we turn it into an order directed at someone. You, sing a song for me. We could also have told someone how to sing the song. Sing loudly. And the adverbial here could have been a prepositional phrase as well. We could have two objects. Sing me a song. Sing the song directed to me. Or verb, object, adverbial. Sing a song loudly. Or put them all together where we have the two objects. Sing me a song loudly. Verb, object, object, adverbial. But we can go more advanced than this. As well as simply saying sing a song, we could add an intensifier beforehand. Do sing a song. Please sing a song. We can turn it into a vocative by putting a name in front. Kim, sing a song. Notice the comma is important here. Kim shows a separation. Kim means I'm going to give this order to you. Without the comma, it would look like the subject. Kim sing a song would then mean that Kim was doing the action, but actually we're not focused on that here. We're focused on it being an instruction to Kim. We can use the causative form here. Let her sing. Here we have the object and the verb after the causative word. Remember, let is a type of word that tells us how one thing can cause another. Make her sing, let her sing, have her sing. Make, let, have, they're all types of causative verbs. And we can use what's called a passive imperative, where we simply have two verbs together, but the first one is the verb to be. Be prepared. It's an order to someone that they must prepare themselves. But we simply use the two verbs. Be prepared. Prepared here acts almost like an adjective. Here's an example. Be quiet. Verb adjective. And you could simply have sing on its own as a one-word sentence. Sing. What does that mean? Simply an order to someone to sing. Now, it's also important to know how questions are organised in English. What are the sentence patterns for questions? I'm going to show you the common ways to organise questions. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the ways questions may be organised, because wherever you see subject and verb, then you could apply the rules that you've seen from the rest of the video so far. I'm just going to give you some extra things that you need to know to get the question patterns right. So very commonly, we will use an auxiliary before the subject and verb. Are you singing? Do you sing? Are and do are auxiliary words here, and you singing and you sing form the subject and verb of the question. Now, when we have an auxiliary followed by subject and verb, the answer is yes or no. But we have other question words that we use starting with WH or how, where more answers are possible. Any answer is possible at all. Such as here, what do you sing? So we have a WH question, what, then the auxiliary do, and then you sing. And the answer could be anything. Well, I sing classical music, pop music, any type of music at all. Not yes or no. If we want to be more specific with what we're asking about, we can add an object into the question after the question word. Which instruments do you play? Here we have the WH word, then instruments is the object, then the auxiliary, and then subject and verb. Which instruments do you play? I play the guitar. So you can see in the response, I play, I is the subject, guitar is the object. Guitar represents the instruments, so it shows the link to the object there. We may just have the question word followed by a verb. Who is singing? In other words, who is doing this activity? And sometimes we can put a preposition in front as well. For whom will you sing? The answer is I will sing for this person. So the preposition asks us more about the direction of the question. Not just what will you sing, but for whom? Which person? And we can often use prepositions in that place. Sometimes we could put them at the end too. Who will you sing for? We can also use something called question tags. You sing, don't you? You don't sing, do you? Here we have the subject and the verb. And of course, this could be a longer sentence too. And then the tag is the auxiliary that you would have used in a question for the verb. So with sing, the question would have been, do you sing? So we use the tag. The auxiliary is negative if the sentence is positive, and the auxiliary is positive if the sentence was negative. So you sing, don't you? Positive, negative. And you don't sing, do you? negative, positive. And the tag is used either to confirm what the person is saying or to show you expect the other person to agree with what you're saying. Now, sometimes the tag can go at the start if you're turning it into an exclamation where you expect agreement. Doesn't she sing well? Here we have the tag at the beginning, and she now becomes the subject of the sentence. Negatives also have particular features of their order. Let's look at the key ones. Again, I'm not going to cover every sentence type in the negative form because all you need to do is take the grammar that you see and expand it in the way that you would with the rules we've already learnt earlier in the video. But so that you know enough, to be is followed by the negative form. She is not popular in this country. So that's if to be is the verb. But if it's not to be that's the verb, then put the negative auxiliary first. She doesn't sing in large stadiums. Doesn't is the negative auxiliary. The verb is sing. Now, modals also can be turned into negative without an auxiliary. She can't sing in large stadiums. Here we have can't followed by sing. Can't comes from the auxiliary can. And with questions, we could have done the same. We could have replaced the auxiliary with a modal verb, like can, could, might, would, will, shall, should, those verbs, the modal verbs. Something you can do with negatives is negative inversion. And here you add a different negative word to the beginning of the sentence before the subject, followed by the auxiliary, and then you have the rest of the sentence. And this just gives extra emphasis to the negative. Never have I heard her sing so well. What does this mean? Well, it really simply means I haven't heard her sing so well. But by using never at the beginning rather than the subject, we're giving more emphasis to the negative feature of this sentence. And we emphasize to the listener more that the negative is important here. Never have I heard her sing so well. In English, we have something called cleft sentences, and these have different word order again. Here's a simple cleft sentence. It is the singer who is late. Here we have it followed by the verb to be, is. And then we have the subject, the singer, and then we have the relative pronoun followed by the rest of the clause. What does this mean? Well, it really means the singer is late. But by using this structure, we choose to isolate the singer and show that this is the most important thing of the sentence. It is the singer who is late. Do you see the difference compared to the singer is late? Maybe the question was, who is late? Oh, it is the singer who is late. Another way of doing this is to have the relative pronoun at the beginning. What she wants is a singing contract. So here we have the relative pronoun, then the subject she, then the verb wants, then the second verb is to be. And then we have the rest of the sentence. And again, this is just to create emphasis on the first thing. What she wants goes to the beginning. A singing contract is what she wants. So here I've reorganized it so a singing contract goes to the beginning. Whatever comes at the beginning, we're trying to emphasize to the listener or reader. So here we have the object going to the beginning. Then we have the verb is. Then we have the relative pronoun, then she wants. There's a few other words that introduce a cleft sentence, such as there. There is a form which she must sign. So the form is emphasized here. Instead of just saying she must sign a form, the form is at the end. Here we emphasize the form by bringing it to the front. And all she wants is a singing contract. So instead of just saying she wants a singing contract, by adding all, we show that she wants this and nothing else. increasing the importance on those words. And exclamations. Now, these usually occur with a question word followed by a sentence that looks like a question, but is actually meant as an exclamation. Look at the first example. What a beautiful voice she has. So this really means she has a beautiful voice. But to emphasize the fact that her voice is beautiful, we move it to the beginning and we have this question word in front of it. What a beautiful voice she has. It's a little bit like the question tag we saw before. Doesn't she have a beautiful voice? And we can also use inversion here. How beautiful does her voice sound? And again, we do this to amplify, to emphasize the fact that it is beautiful. So here we have the question word, how, followed by the adjective beautiful, then the auxiliary, then the subject, her voice, and then the verb comes at the end, sound. What does this mean? It means her voice sounds beautiful. But we use the rules of inversion to move everything to the front that we want to be important. So beautiful is the thing we want to focus on. We move it to the front this way. Now, I said at the beginning of the video, I would come back to adverbs. Why have I left adverbs to the end? The reason is because adverbs are messy. Adverb rules in sentences go beyond sentence structure. You have to take into account the meaning of the words you're using too. And for that reason, I think it's better to direct you to another video that's dedicated just to this. So watch my video on adverbs here. Or you can move on and try my Improve Your English Writing course that takes you much further than this video has into how you can improve your English writing. There's a link in the video description below. You can start the course today.